Have the Atlanta Hawks exposed the Cleveland Cavaliers' weakness? The Cavs are 17-3, so we're a long way away from needing to press any kind of panic button if you're a Cavs fan. Well, a rational one anyways. But at the same time, if you let that ridiculously hot start convince you that this was a roster that was completely flawless, then, well, this is probably your reminder that that's also not the case. But what is it about dropping 2 games in a row to the Atlanta Hawks that actually might be a bit of a cause for concern? Well, I had a theory, and I wanted to explore it. For starters, this offseason, I was absolutely stoked that they hired Kenny Atkinson. He was the coach that I wanted, and the coach that they got, and he's done an absolutely phenomenal job in these first 20 games at the helm. But I also believed that it was time for a decision to be made with this roster. Either you're committed to the core 4 or you're not. And either way, there's going to be some sort of roster shakeup needed. They committed to the core 4, but then they didn't do the other piece, which was to try to bolster the supporting cast and make sure that it was optimal and that it maximized the core 4's strengths while minimizing the core 4's weaknesses. They chose to do nothing, even with their first round draft pick where they got Jalen Tyson, who I like, but doesn't really have a pathway to minutes when people are healthy because he's just so similar to guys that they already have on the roster ahead of him. And that's ultimately where my theory begins, in that as long as they are so overly reliant on Dean Wade as the only versatile 3-4 on this roster, they're going to struggle against teams that have length on the perimeter. Something that the Hawks in particular have, like, a lot of. And so do the Celtics, the 3 games that the Cavs have lost so far. So let's explore that idea. I'm going to go back through the box score for every one of the Cavs' first 20 games, and let's keep an eye out for how well those lengthy perimeter players, and particularly the wings, have played so far. Like, subscribe, and let's get into it. The season kicked off with the Toronto Raptors, who used to give the Cavs just absolute fits with their length, but since they got rid of Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby, they're not really the same team. And without RJ Barrett, who is a lengthy guard in that first matchup, it was really just Scotty Barnes. And Evan Mobley had him absolutely miserable. Plus, they had Dean Wade, and that was enough to not really have a problem in Game 1. Then came the Pistons, who got a huge game out of their guards, who are good size, particularly Cade Cunningham, who's a 6'6" point guard, and they played the Cavs tough, which I think you would have guessed would happen with JB Bickerstaff taking over that job, and Cade Cunningham had 33 points as their leading perimeter player with, like I said, good length, but guys like Tim Hardaway Jr. and even Tobias Harris, while having kind of the body and mold, like, he's not really the kind of guy that we're all that worried about because he's pretty much a 4 at this point in his career, and Tim Hardaway Jr. is not really that big. But in Game 3, against the Wizards, who are trash, so this game was a blowout, but hidden in that blowout is a 23-point, 6-rebound performance from Bilal Coulibaly, who shot 9 of 16 from the floor, 4 of 9 on threes. That's a 6'8" athletic wing who is exactly the type of guy that we're looking at for this exercise, and that's him outplaying his averages by 10 points. He's a 34% three-point shooter, and that was his second best game of the year. And it came against the Cavs. That's not nothing. Then we had Game 4, the Knicks, who it took a Garland heroic effort to get that W, and they've definitely got the long wings that we're talking about in both Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby, who also both played pretty well in that game. Bridges had 19 points on 9 of 15 shooting. OG Anunoby had 15 points on 7 of 13 shooting, and he led the Knicks and was the only starter for the Knicks with a positive plus-minus in that game. And that's with the Cavs having all of their wings, with the exception of Strus, obviously, available. Game 5 was the Lakers, and that one was a blowout. A fun one at that if you're a Cavs fan. But The very big wing that we are all very familiar with, LeBron James, played quite well, scoring 26 points in 29 minutes in that game, and he only missed 4 shots. Then came Game 6 against the Magic, who were down Paolo Banchero, which helps when it comes to the big wing discussion, but still, Franz Wagner had 17, 8, and 6 in this game, and Tristan de la Silva came off the bench as a 6'8 wing for 17 points, with 6 of 8 shooting from the floor, easily his best game of the season. Games 7 and 8, those were back-to-back against the Bucks, and both of those went down to the wire. Giannis and Dame were dominant in the first game, and Dame was great in Game 2. Now, they don't really have the big wings that you're really talking about in this discussion, but if you wanted to kind of dig a little bit, you could point out that Taurean Prince played quite well in that first game, and that Andre Jackson was a +7 in Game 2, which was the second best plus-minus on the team. Game 9 came against the Pelicans, and they narrowly escaped this one with their lives. Seriously, Jose Alvarado was stealing everything but their soul. And they struggled in this game against Brandon Ingram, and with Brandon Boston, and even Javonte Green played well, who plays bigger than he really is on the wing. Game 10 was the funnest game of the season so far if you are a Cavs fan. That was when they absolutely dominated the Warriors, and there's not much to take away from that one, except pure fandom joy. Oh, and there was this little thing, just a hidden strong game from one Jonathan Kuminga, a long wing. In Game 11, they nearly dropped it to the Nets, and that may sound surprising, but if you subscribe to this theory that they might have some difficulties with longer wings, then this should have been somewhat expected. And Cam Johnson had 23 points and went 4 of 7 from 3. Dorian Finney-Smith was a +11 in his 29 minutes. There's a reason that these two guys were tied to the Cavs all summer long in the rumor mill. They're the exact archetype of a player that would look really good on this team, and therefore also the exact kind that can be dangerous against them. Game 12 was the Bulls, which nearly ended the winning streak, and a lot of dudes played well in this game, including 6'8 Josh Giddey, who flirted with a triple-double, and Patrick Williams had a double-double. In Game 13, it was the shorthanded Sixers, and it was a way closer game than you probably ever think that it would have been, and a lot of that was due to Jared McCain, who's been playing just out of his mind for his rookie season, but they also got good games out of Kelly Oubre and from Gershon Yabusele and Caleb Martin, the wings, who all outplayed their averages significantly. Game 14 was another matchup with the Bulls, which, if you remember, or, well, you may have forgotten by now, this game was actually pretty close until the Cavs broke it open at the end and then just ran the score up because of the point differential in the NBA Cup. They were able to keep Josh Giddey in check in this one, but Patrick Williams played well again and had his second highest scoring game of the season. Game 15 was the Hornets, and they've got a bunch of dude with size on the perimeter. Like, basically their entire starting lineup. Seriously, it's just a lineup that's full of length and rangy perimeter players. They started Grant Williams at the 5, and all of them pretty much played well against the Cavs, led by LaMelo Ball, their 6'7" point guard, and to the Cavs' credit, they were able to keep Brandon Miller in check, who, quite frankly, if he shoots the ball better, this game's even closer than it was. Game 16 came against the Celtics, and that's the first loss of the season for the Cavs, and I don't think I need to tell you about length on the perimeter and versatility. That's quite literally what the Celtics are built on, and that is especially true for Jason Tatum, who went off for 33 points, had 12 rebounds, and 7 assists. Now, Game 17 was against the Pelicans G League team, and there's really nothing to take away or read into from that matchup, but Game 18 was the Raptors again, and this time with RJ Barrett in the lineup. Scotty Barnes played better, RJ Barrett wasn't bad either, and the one role player that actually played well for them in this game coming off the bench was Jonathan Mobo, who I'm honestly not that familiar with. but I can read measurables, and he's a wing with pretty good size. Now you know games 19 and 20. These are the two losses that we just saw against the Hawks, who are full of long wings. Zachary Risache, 6'8". DeAndre Hunter, 6'8". Dyson Daniels, 6'7". Jalen Johnson, 6'8". You saw good contests in these games with guys like Ty Jerome, and it just didn't matter that much because they were able to just shoot over the top. DeAndre Hunter in particular looked like an all-star, and Jalen Johnson probably is. And Dyson Daniels just makes life hell. They're not an amazing team in every matchup, but they are built to be particularly challenging for the Cavs. So what have we learned? Are the Cavs actually susceptible to the longer perimeter players? I'd say they are. So what does that mean looking forward? Well, here are some teams that are on the schedule that we probably want to kind of look out for and keep an eye on. You've got Atlanta, obviously. The Celtics, obviously. Brooklyn, who, as we mentioned, has proven that they can give them fits. The Hornets aren't an easy matchup, even though they're not as talented. Then you've got the Thunder, who are definitely going to be a tough matchup. The Nuggets have a lot of size. You got the Mavs, you got the Magic, especially when Paolo comes back. You got the Suns, the Rockets for sure. The Spurs, the Clippers have some size, and the Knicks, as you know. There's going to be some tough matchups ahead, and I'm not saying that the Cavs can't beat these teams, but they will need to overcome some challenges, particularly with that length on the perimeter. And ironically, if you noticed, a lot of those upcoming matchups in games that I listed off are going to be against some of the better teams in both of the conferences, which shouldn't be a shock. The best teams have these versatile wings with size. The Cavs are actually kind of the outlier in that regard, which means they're just going to have to find other ways to win those matchups and find advantages at other spots on the floor and not let that particular weakness be too damaging. What do you think? Do the Cavs need to make some kind of move to get another bigger wing on this roster as Dean Wade insurance, if nothing else, because health has always been a struggle for him? Or do you think that they can win it all just as they're constructed right now? Let me know down in the comments and click here for more Cavs videos.